For Creamer Media's Polity, I'm Shannon de Rehove. Author Susan Newham-Blake joins me to discuss her book Making Finn, about her unconventional journey to motherhood. The story of your journey to motherhood is deeply personal. What made you want to share it with the public through a book?
Right, well actually I've been a magazine journalist for many years, so I'm a writer, and obviously I always had a dream, as many writers do, to write a book. After going through my journey of conceiving my family, I realized that a lot of people were really interested in the story. So I was getting requests. I'd start telling somebody that I had kids and how we had conceived them, and they just want more and more information. So I realized that there was quite a lot of interest in the actual story. So I decided to write a book, and the main thing that possibly got me through to the end of the book is that it's quite a unique conception story for my children, and I wanted to record it for them. I wanted to record it as I remembered it happening. And so that's sort of really what got me to writing to the end. Of course, while I was writing it, I didn't really think that it was going to get published, and even after Penguin contacted me and said they would publish it, I didn't really think that anyone would read it. So there was a moment after it had been published that I thought, oh my goodness, what have I done? I've written this deeply personal story, and I just wanted to crawl under a rock and disappear. But that is really, I think, having the story out there has also been very rewarding, in the sense that I think a lot of people have also kind of been helped by my journey. So that's felt very rewarding, that I've been able to share it. But primarily I did write it for my children, so that they would know their story, and that they would know how much they really had been wanted, and also how they'd been considered in the process.
What advice would you impart to couples that are considering donor insemination?
My instinct is just to say, go for it. It is a big decision, and it is, there are a lot of considerations. I think, though, that if I knew then at the beginning of the journey what I know now, I probably wouldn't have been so angsty about it and so anxious about it. And I would have just trusted that it was going to be all right, because it has actually turned out to be a really incredible experience. But I do, personally, I think that it's important to always consider the children. So obviously bringing children into the world, wittingly, knowingly that they're not going to necessarily know who their biological father is, needs to be considered. And I think, knowing that they won't have a father necessarily, or no matter how you do it, knowing that you're going to use a known donor, or what that role that person is going to play in their life, that stuff I would advise needs to be thought through before the children are there, preferably. At some point you're going to have to think through it. But my feeling is that if you're okay with it, and you've made peace with the reality of what your family is and who they are and what they are capable of and not capable of, that will certainly rub off on your children. If you're proud and fine about who your family is, they will be proud and fine as to who their family is. For us it was very important to use an identity release donor, so that our children could have more knowledge about their genetic material that was available from an anonymous donor. But that was a personal decision, and I certainly think that people make their own decisions given their own set of circumstances and what feels possible for them. And a lot of people choose to adopt because they couldn't do something like that. So everybody's decisions need to be respected, but I think it's good to think through them. And as I said, just go for it if you want to.
How did you cope psychologically through this process, especially the negative comments and harsh reactions?
Well, to be honest, we didn't really come across many negative comments or harsh criticisms at all. I think Roxy and I have both been very open about who we are. We've also both worked very hard to be okay with who we are and made peace with that. I think that we've lived in the world like that. So there were no secrets. I had at my job, I have a career. From my boss to whoever, the receptionist, everyone knew that I was trying for a baby this way, and certainly people were just mostly very, very supportive and quite delighted in the story. we have obviously had the odd comment where people might have said something like, I don't think it's right for gay people to bring children into the world. And, that's more of a reflection on who they are than who we are. And, I disagree with that. I think that it's a bit about developing a thick skin, but obviously hurtful comments are hurtful, and there have been the odd comment that that has obviously been hurtful, but it is the reality of our situation. I think my belief that we're doing the right thing, and also just kind of in a way putting ourselves out there in the hope that it will help change people's perceptions of who gay people are, or whatever it happens to be, change people's prejudices, that gives me a lot of strength to keep going. But it was difficult, certainly, I really struggled with the concept of using this anonymous donor to create a family. It felt like I was in some kind of peculiar, surreal movie that, it took a lot of processing to feel okay with that, and still sometimes I think it seems quite bizarre, but it was what we needed to do to create the family. And there were definitely very, very difficult times, but I think what pulled me through was just knowing that it was right, and I'm certainly very, very glad that I did go through with it.
What was the most difficult aspect of this journey?
I think just deciding on how, I think that I knew I wanted to have children. I think just making the decision of how to have them. We considered adoption, we considered using a known donor, anonymous donor. And in South Africa, anonymous donors, really, you had very little information about the child. You really were never going to be able to know more than what was on a very small piece of paper, height, weight, skin color, and interests, and that was it. And I really struggled to kind of feel okay about any of those one ways of having a child. And I think, you're brought up in a world where that nuclear family is absolutely celebrated and, kind of revered, and that is what is the epitome of what a successful family looks like. So that is what we all have internalized inside our brains, that this is, the only right way to create a family is through, married, devoted male-female couples. So, anything that isn't that feels very hard to go against that. And so I think that was a very difficult process to come to terms with. And then, of course, what we did discover was that there were what was called identity release donors in sperm banks in the States. And they were, where the child, when they turned 18, could find out who their biological father had been. And this just seemed like a really good compromise for us. And that was, something that we then landed up considering and doing it that way.
It must have also been quite difficult because South Africa is generally very conservative.
Again, I was, the whole journey from the very helpful customs official on the other side of the customs helpline, who I had to try and explain to him why I wanted to bring sperm from the United States of America to South Africa. And he said to me, but can't you get that kind of stuff in South Africa? We just really did find people were generally quite eager to help us. I mean, the freight company that kind of mostly just brings in textiles from overseas had also kind of, the guy drove his car to the airport in Cape Town and went to the customs officials and physically brought us the container from Cape Town International to my home on a Saturday morning with his daughter sitting in the car. So, and gave me a big hug and said, good luck. So I know that people find it, that it isn't the norm, but people were very genuinely, caring. The fertility clinic was fantastic. Our gynecologist was fantastic. Everybody that we've come across along the journey has been really great. Now that Finn is 5.5 and he's in grade R in preschool, his teachers are fantastic. The principal of the school is fantastic. The school he's going into next year for grade 1 have been really embracing. That is what we feel. That is our experience in the world that we're currently living in. So I feel like maybe we're not as conservative as we think we are. And I also think that there are a lot more people doing this than just Roxy and I, and certainly I've met women who've got families that are much older than us, that have used sperm donation 10 years ago, who have 3 daughters, and we've only just started meeting them through the book, and they've heard about us, and they might have been living 2 streets away. Also fertility treatment in general is very common. So I've also had lots of straight couples contact me and say they've fallen pregnant using an egg donor. They might not necessarily tell all their friends and family about it. We had to, because we were 2 women, so we couldn't pretend anything. But I think there are a lot of straight couples that, due to fertility issues, actually do use egg donors and sperm donors, who've contacted me and told me and shared their stories with me. So we just happen to be gay, but I think in vitro or whatever artificial insemination is almost becoming really commonplace. A lot of families are created that way these days, and however many years ago, that also seemed really strange and unusual. So, I think South Africa will continue to become more open-minded to these things.
You end your story with the simple sentence that Jet's birth, your second son, is another story. Can we expect a second book from you?
It's a good question, and there is a second book. Not that it's been written yet, but there's a second story. Jet was conceived very similarly to Finn, so it isn't really that story of how Jet was conceived. He was conceived with the same donor as Finn, in the same way as Finn was conceived. Roxy carried him, and we both had very similar pregnancies, and gave birth naturally, and all that kind of thing. So that the stories are quite similar, but I suspect that the second story is a lot more about family dynamics and what it's like for 2 women to raise a family, and the kind of parenting roles that people take on. And but I do think that the second book is quite a lot more difficult to write, because as the boys get older, they're more aware, and it's a lot more personal, and it involves them much more directly than what just making them, which was involving us 2 adults making this decision. So we'll have to see, actually. There's certainly another story out there, but we'll see whether I ever get to write it. But there has been a lot of requests about writing it. I am writing other books, though, so but more fiction-type stories and that kind of thing, that in a similar sort of style as the non-fiction, but sort of just, doing fiction instead, yeah.
Well, it sounds very exciting, and I look forward to reading those too. That was author Susan Newham-Blake discussing her book, Making Finn.